to Potty Chat Peoples. I am Savi. I am joined today by Stacy as well as Nina, who previously spoken with us about animals and things, and newcomer Dante,
Hello,
who
hello.
is a newcomer.
Welcome, Dante.
Welcome, welcome. What are
A
we
new
talking about?
challenger, guys.
A new challenger has
I'm a new
arrived.
challenger.
So what are we talking about today?
Well, first we have a little news roundup. We want to talk about the latest update with Apple and Epic. Then I have a couple of quick things about Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and Doom Eternal to go over. And then we're going to get into the games we've been playing. You're going to talk about 7 Days to Die and ECO, which is ECO. Those who might be
Not
familiar with
the
another game
PlayStation
that
2
sounds like it.
classic ICO.
Right. Then Dante's going to talk about Last of Us and specifically narrative dissonance, which is a good topic for that game. And then I'm going to compare The Last of Us Part 2 with Ghost of Tsushima, which I'm playing a lot. And then Nina's going to talk about branching choice games, particularly Kentucky Route Zero and the original Life is Strange.
Yep, that's a good roundup, I'd say.
Yeah,
So anyone who would like to can now turn off their phasing into another dimension mode in their virtual background. uh, let's kick it off with those news stories, yeah? So the first one is Apple versus Epic. For those who haven't been caught up on this fun stuff, very quickly, Epic put out an update to Fortnite on iPhone and Android and got removed from both of those stores because the update let you pay them directly instead of going through the respective platforms and giving 30% to the respective companies. And it was completely planned. They knew what would happen because they very quickly had like a prepared video that made fun of the 1984 commercial that Apple had back in the day, except it's using Fortnite characters. It's fucking hilarious and stupid. And yeah, I love watching companies fight. But the next stage in this is basically that a judge has ruled that Apple cannot be a massive douchebag and suspend the developer account of Epic, which would not have only affected Epic's games, but actually seems to it would have actually like prevented the Unreal Engine from being able to build IPA files that you upload to the App Store. So that's my understanding, is it would have fucked over a lot of other developers.
Right, exactly. It's about all the independent developers using the Unreal Engine getting caught in this fight that's ultimately between Epic and Apple and has nothing to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But Fortnite is going to continue to stay off the store. If you already have it, you can keep it, but there will be no updates, at least for now. But you are not able to download this Fortnite if you don't already have it.
Yeah, so I guess that means some weird tiny subsection of the gaming population. Like, is this going to be the new like PT? Like, I have it on my phone. Like, then you sell it on eBay. Like, I have
I'm
the
gonna
version.
unlock my phone just for Fortnite.
Yeah, I have the version of. No, you don't even have to unlock it because you already have that update in theory.
Right.
So I don't know if App Store can actually like force you to like roll back to a previous version. So maybe like some weird subset of people on Apple are actually able to pay Epic directly. But in any case, yeah, that's the flip side, is that they still have that ability to keep Fortnite off the store for now. The battle, I'm sure, will continue, but that's the little update on that front.
I also want to add another quick thing, though. They have also started the IPO process for Unreal Engine to become its own company outside of Epic as a whole. So that disarms Apple's ability to threaten the Unreal Engine, at least in the long run.
Interesting. Yeah.
These people are smart, man.
They are smart. They prepared for this moment, clearly.
I like it when I watch two trash companies, just like see who can be the trashiest.
It's great. It's great. It's like it was when it first like happened in the gamer channel on my work Slack. People were like, I was a little bit upset that people were throwing out like the most surface, like, yeah, but both companies are trash kind of like takes on it, where I'm just like, we all know this, whatever, like let's talk more about this, because this is way more fun to watch than you guys like this kind of like, whatever, they're both terrible. Because my favorite detail is definitely like using the 1984 commercial, because not only is it trashy kind of for like Epic to use that now, but I hope it reminds people that it was trashy for Apple to do it back in the 80s.
Right. For sure.
Ooh.
Because like they were the underdog company, and then it's just like, we're gonna defeat Microsoft and release the people. And just, shut up, you're here to make money anyway. So so that's that story. That's gonna be ongoing. We'll continue to watch that because it does actually have like implications for, I mean, Fortnite players, I guess, but mostly I'm concerned. Like, I'm interested if they can continue to whittle down like Apple's argument here, and then developers who use the App Store can hopefully get a better cut, because that could definitely change the mobile gaming space significantly. We'll see.
Yep. So to move on to the next story, I've been a fan of BioWare for many years. They make some games with some pretty good story and, in most cases, decent gameplay as well. So the most prominent being Mass Effect, their sci-fi franchise, and Dragon Age, their medieval-based magic franchise. And I had kind of assumed, since Electronic Arts bought them, that they will die a quick death, but it appears they're not gone just yet. Mass Effect is about to have a release by the holidays of a remaster of their games, which should be available on consoles as well as PC. And Mass Effect 1 in particular was borderline unplayable by modern standards, but has a very, very strong story. So I'm looking forward to that being put in a more playable format.
That's the number one, like, that game being so old and dated has been the roadblock towards me replaying the whole trilogy. Because like,
Quick
I'm like, I
question.
should replay the whole thing, and they're like, I gotta play Mass Effect 1.
5 minutes into that, you're like,
Never
I
mind.
can't take this Mako driving maneuver business anymore.
Question, guys. As someone who's actually never played the first 3 games and knows about that controversy, is this a thing that's actually worth picking up
Yes.
if you haven't experienced it?
Yes.
Yes. Like,
Absolutely,
the journey's
yes.
more important than the end. Like, and
So-
not only is that literally arguably part of the ending, but like all the characters you meet along the way, your interactions with them, unquestioned, yes, play it.
Okay.
Yeah, play the whole thing. I'm serious about that. So this should include the DLCs as well, which I'm also excited about,
Having it in
because
one place.
the Mass Effect DLCs in particular were pretty expensive back in the day and very full featured and
They were important
very
too.
interesting.
You actually like the idea of jumping from 2 to 3 without playing the DLC, like, there's an important bits of story there where you're just like, why are we in this situation as
What
we
happened
start
to
the
this
third
character?
game?
This seems odd.
Yeah.
But it's all explained if you play the DLCs, which are really epic and awesome as well.
Mhm.
So I'm really excited that more people will get to see the DLC, even if they play the original game. They probably did not play that. So that's great. And meanwhile, Dragon Age 4 is, they're saying, really happening. There's a story written. There is a little bit of trailery type video out there. They haven't given up on it. So that's a good sign.
And it's a really good sign that, like, after the game that shall not be named that BioWare was forced to make, I'm assuming they were forced to make that, that they're able to remaster the classic and move on with the Dragon Age franchise. Like,
which is still in good order.
yeah, it seems like a good sign that they're managing to. The BioWare of old might actually still be around, and maybe we'll see some good things from them in the future.
Yeah, so that's exciting. So the other short news article was about Doom Eternal. They have a DLC coming out, and that's on October 20th, so not too long from now. And that is called Ancient Gods. And the thing I'm interested in about it, in addition to the fact that the original Doom franchise had no story to speak of, and they've managed to do a lot with very little dialogue with the reboot franchise.
Big codex though, but yes.
Yeah, big codex. There's a lot of reading to do if you want to, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. It's not necessary. You get
It's
a
not
good
an option
bit.
for me.
Well, fair. Well, fair. But by calling this DLC Ancient Gods, it promises to give a little more insight into what the heck is going on outside the realm of Earth with all this mysterious demon business that's been going on. So that's exciting. But more importantly, I think it will be possible for people to pick up and play this DLC without having any of the original Doom games. So I think that is something I'd love to see more of, giving people an opportunity to learn about the franchise for a little less money, but you get a little less content, versus making these DLCs only available to people who have played the original game, and often only after they finish the original game. This Ancient Gods DLC, you can start from nowhere.
Yeah,
You got nothing.
and I think that there's a good history of people doing this, and when it makes sense, especially like with the story and to just slot in and be like an aside, I want to see more of it. Like the last two that I can think of that were really solid was Last of Us Part One having the Left Behind DLC. I think that that was standalone, and then Infamous
Yes,
2
the
had the
vampire one.
First Light. I don't
Oh, the
Vampire.
Festival of Blood was available to download without actually needing to have the original copy of Infamous.
I
Because I
don't even
played
know that deal. Oh, you're talking about Infamous 1?
two. I think it's two.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's
Well,
two.
they also had a DLC First Light, which focused on the character of Fetch and told her story
Mm.
in like a short kind of way, which like was in my mind actually superior to the actual base game of Infamous 2.
Oh no,
Um,
that's Infamous. No, that's Infamous. Second Son. Infamous 2
oh
has the
God,
vampire
yeah,
one,
yeah, yeah,
and
okay.
Infamous Second Son has Fetch.
Word. It's
Sorry,
that's
that's like my
confusing.
favorite game
Why is the
franchise.
third game called Second? Anyway, so
Oh.
You know what? It is what it is. It's definitely still better than movie title. Uh,
Infamous. The next Infamous game is going to be called like First Order or some shit.
right.
Listen,
In
it's
any
better.
case, when DLC first started coming out, it was really questionable whether there was any business model for it at all. And
Mm,
part of the problem was people were overcharging for a relatively small
Mm-hmm.
amount of content, so people wouldn't buy
Yes.
it. They heard
Yep.
bad things and they wouldn't pay the money. So I really would like to see more DLC be genuinely interesting and standalone and give people a new way to introduce themselves to a game without having to go whole hog on
sure.
the
Yeah.
full game costs. So
Yup,
that's
yup,
a
yup.
positive direction. And along the same lines, I think having the entire Mass Effect trilogy available as a single game should be a lot of bang for your buck. So
Yeah.
anyway, speaking of a lot of bang for your buck,
I have played way
Zavi,
too
you want to?
many hours of the following games.
So you want to talk about 7 Days to Die? I've seen you in that a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I've talked to, I think, have I talked about? I don't know if I talked about it in a podcast. Whatever. The it's basically Minecraft with zombies. That's the elevator pitch. But to go a bit more, like it's in the builder genre. It's voxel based as they call it, kind of world where you can move around the terrain and dig and build up your own base in various ways and stuff. What appealed to me about this game many years ago, because it's an early access, it has been for a long time, was just sort of the cosmetic skin on it. Just wanting to give it a try and just be like, okay, Minecraft, except like proper zombie horror kind of thing, and the what they're pretty committed to the idea that especially in the early game, like every enemy should scare you a little bit. Like it can turn
Mm.
from like I have this under control. It's daylight and there's only one zombie and I have the weapon and I'll be fine. And then you're just like poke and I'm fine and poke and then like shit goes to hell really fast because like the zombie hits you and it stuns you and then you're not moving and then it gets a few hits on you and now you're fucking dead. And like you start to learn very quickly that like it's a
Ooh.
genuinely like scary world that you're in, and like now we're seeing some gameplay that shows like a submachine gun, which quite frankly you will not have for like the first very long time in this game. But early on you're using like a spear and like very basic kind of equipment. Your first task is to like uh build a like clothes for yourself out of like plant fibers and stuff. It's very like survivalist. Certain parts like you can see here kind of feel like more like Mad Maxy type of vibe and stuff, but it's been improving over the years like any early access game should. But it always had a good foundation, and it has a few key things that I think make it good. So you're basically in a never-ending arms race in this game, trying to improve your tech and your equipment because every 7 in-game days you're gonna have a horde night, and a horde night is basically that like when a certain hour strikes, zombies are going to know where you are, and they're gonna go apeshit and try to kill you. And so, like, in a sense, everything you're doing is trying to serve that kind of preparation for that horde day. And it kind of gives you just enough of a guidance for like these kind of siege scenarios, so that you're not just building for the sake of like just making a pretty thing, although you can play the game that way if you want. You're also building with the intention of like, I need to make this defensible. Like, and it's very fun because initially you stumble around in the game and you're like, okay, well, I'm only going to make this one entrance and I'm going to reinforce it a lot, and then at least this is what I did years ago. And then Horde Night comes, and you're just like, wait a minute, I have no way to kill the zombies. I'm stuck inside, and that's the only exit. I'm gonna die in 2 minutes. And then you learn, you start to build more elaborate bases and stuff. And it's worth mentioning that you can play this game single player or with a group on a server. So years ago I had a server that I rented. Nowadays my buddy has a server that he's doing with a lot of his coworkers that I join in on, and it's really like grown in terms of quality of life ways, and to the point where now I feel like this feels pretty damn close to like it has felt definitely worth the money for a while now, but this feels at this point like it has very few hard edges in my mind. I know my friends will complain about like the pathfinding AI and stuff, and I'm just like, they're zombies, chill. But the last two things that are kind of worth mentioning, or the last one thing, sorry, that is kind of worth mentioning that I like, is that in a lot of builder games, there's this very basic, like, simple little hacks that you can do. Like, in Minecraft, you can't build until it's like attached to something, but once it's attached to something, you can destroy everything that came before and it just floats there. And you can literally just have like a floating fortress in the sky kind of deal. In this game, you can't. You actually have to have a vertical support for everything, and that only supports a certain distance away from that vertical support. So if you start building stuff and then you step on it, it'll just fall. And then that's also important because if you just try to build like a second story base, zombies can destroy your supports and then the whole thing falls. And so like there's a certain amount of realism that gives it that I think is kind of important for the gameplay, because you're just otherwise in a lot of those games you have like these very basic things you can do to just have a floating fortress, and it would just break the game so hardcore. And like not enough games have copied this shit basically, where it's just having that basic structure, because in a lot of builder games, whether it's like Dragon Quest Builders or some other ones, my favorite thing is when the game forces you to build rooms in like a logical way, rather than just like the bare necessities for like the crafting or the upgrading that you might want. Like in Dragon Quest Builders, it's literally fellow villagers who would just be like, we want a bathhouse because
Yeah.
we want one. So here's what you need to put in the right spots, and here's the blueprint, and then you build it. And that feels nice to me versus just approaching it in a purely mechanical way, which I see a lot of people doing at like high level, if you can call it that, like Minecraft play or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say there are a lot of builder survival games and there are a lot of zombie fighting games and not a whole lot of combination of the two.
yeah, and I really like the combination of the two. They reinforce each other very well. It's very like, and obviously everything's more fun when you play with friends, but I still think it's pretty good single player too. If only to like start to learn the mechanics and things and whatnot. Um, I like there's the funny thing about playing with friends online though is like one of the things this game has that no games have anymore is friendly fire. And when you're talking about the chaos of a siege night, and like people trying to communicate and be like, no, I got this zombie or whatever, like it really just takes one
Yeah,
person
you're
just
not
stepping
supposed to
into a
step on the
firing
trap on the
line.
staircase. That was for the zombies, man.
Exactly, but it's even more basic than that, where it's just like you go out together and it's just like,
Look
okay,
where you're
cool, like
going.
I'm gonna go stab this thing with like my really like badass matchet or whatever, and then the other person has a shotgun, and it's hilarity ensues. But I want to say this is basically the closest game I've felt towards like giving you that zombie survival like vibe, like that reenacting the movie of like what would we do, that sort of thing. Like
Mhm.
this is the closest game. Um, on a somewhat similar tip, another builder game, but like completely non-violent is this game called Eco, and it's ECO. It stands for it stands for two things really: economy and ecology.
Hmm.
And the setup for this game, this is pretty much a multiplayer only game. It's important to get that out there. But what it is you enter a world, and in 30 real world days from the inception of that world, a meteor is going to hit and kill everything. And so what you need to do is build up the technology level of this society, civilization, what have you, on the server that you play on. Or you can play single player, like, again, to learn stuff, but it's really more of a multiplayer game. uh you have to get the technology to the point where you can basically build giant freaking lasers that will destroy the meteor. And the trick, though, is that in the process of trying to get your technology to that place, you can absolutely destroy the planet that you're on. You can absolutely hunt animals to extinction, chop down trees to extinction, like et cetera, et cetera. You can make the economy or ecology reach a point where you've hit a dead end and now you're all fucked and you're gonna die because the meteor is gonna kill you. So this game is basically trying to like train people to not be dickbags so that we can deal with global warming. That's the way I see it. And it's a fascinating experiment in that regard. It's entirely nonviolent. You can't really do much to grief people in this game. The closest thing you can do to grief people is like plant your like claim property that's adjacent to theirs, so that if they had plans when they got more deeds to like claim that property so that they could work it, like now you fucked them over, I guess. But deeds now, like it's another early access game that's been worked on over time. Like deeds are now at a point where like they'll expire in due time. So if someone just comes into grief and then disappears, in a few days their deed will expire and they'll be gone, and you can reclaim that land. It leans really heavy on the notion of private property, which might be like a inherently like you might want to do things another way, and but you actually can, like, even though it hedges on this notion of private property, you can go in there and just be like, you know what, I'm making this public. And some people do that. I actually have been on servers where I've seen like socialist collectives spring up, and it's really funny because it does break economies and it does piss people off. There was the last server that I was playing on, there's a store that's just free skill books for everyone. And the skill books are non-trivial to actually like build them and make them, and so on. So like there's some other places on the server that are trying to sell them, but this place, if you make, if you hoof it all the way over there, it's just free skill books for everyone. And so it's this very interesting multiplayer experiment of like how are players going to cooperate and whatnot. And that's kind of like the high level part of the game that I find interesting. The kind of moment by moment gameplay, certainly early on, if not throughout your time on the server, depending on how much time you put into the game and whatnot, is actually very much like your builder type game where you have to chop down trees, you have to gather the resources, you have to use workstations and workbenches and various other things to like craft items. But what separates this game is that outside of single player, it's impossible for you to do everything. And that's by design. It really wants to force you into a specialization so that you have to engage with the economy in some ways. So when you choose a specialization, for example, it shows you everyone on the server who has picked that specialization and what level they're at, so that maybe you'll want to pick a niche, so that maybe you'll be able to sell stuff at like a higher price or something like that. But the basics of builders are basically there, but it also has certain rule reinforcement things. So if you make a room, there's some rules like you can't have windows that are more than two contiguous empty slots, because that's something people would commonly do to like just be like, I have one giant window and I've saved 5 wood by doing that over and over again. And then another thing that they have is that your workbenches, they have requirements. They need to be in a room. They need to have a certain amount of free space in that room. And then as the workbenches become more sophisticated, higher level of technology, all of the materials that make up the room have to actually be higher tier. So that's what starts to push this economy and make it so that you really need to start cooperating with players. And then when the game starts getting really interesting is that you'll reach a point, if you play enough, that you can't do everything yourself per se, and you might actually want to incentivize players who are newer or are just lower level in terms of like their tech tree or whatever than you to do the manual labor. So you can actually post jobs and actually like make those players, not make them, but you can encourage those players to do those jobs for you, like finish this house or like
Wow.
build a road from point A to point B. And that is how you actually see governments pop up in this game. Actual collections of people who have decided that this is the next thing that they want to do, whether their objective is to destroy the meteor, or as I think is very funny, sometimes people gather and they go, meteors are people too, and their political platform is let it destroy everything. But that's where the dynamics get really wild in this game. I've not like I'm always someone who just likes to watch shit unfold. So I've been on some servers where I just like watch that happen, and I really can't like fully explain the depths of this game. There's a web browser
I do
that
feel like the huge majority of people playing this game are going to get to the point where they can no longer be self-sufficient and just kind of like, oh, well, they're going to stop playing.
no, that's not true.
I think so.
So,
I mean,
wait,
I'm watching these servers go, and I see
And
how
people
these
get
players
hooked,
are
huh?
operating, and
Zavi,
you
question
might
for
be
you.
there might be a lot of players that fit what you're saying, Stacy, but there's a lot of players in the chat who are strategizing about what the next tech is that they need to do and why and all that stuff. So
Huh.
that's there for sure. What was that,
Right.
Dante?
How often does the media destroy? Like, that's what I'm very interested in. So, like, the end
30
result.
real world
No, I
days.
mean, but like, how often is
Oh,
it? Do you
I
know?
see what
Like,
you're saying.
do people actually get this shit together and actually collectively destroy this meteor, or
I mean,
is it
I don't know.
more?
I know that both have happened. I know that.
Okay.
Like, I
Huh.
just from the newsletters that I follow of like the development of the game, people have definitely defeated the meteor, no
What do they
question.
do?
People
Like
have done it.
develop
People
a
have done it
rocket
as
and send it out?
quickly. No, your goal is to build giant freaking lasers, so, which is adorable.
Wow.
But um, uh, people have destroyed the meteor in as few as 10 days, I think. Um, but when you're talking about like throwing a bunch of new players together, they probably don't do it. Like not the first time around.
Yeah.
But this game is actually like people play this in classrooms. The developers are very much uh, um, positioning this game as an edutainment game, and there's a
Hmm.
license you can buy for an entire classroom so that they get their own server, and like every one of those computers runs the game. So yeah, this game is freaking fascinating,
That's cool
and
as hell.
it's one of the most relaxing games ever for me. Like I have this running while I work because nothing bad can happen to you if you just let the game idle whatsoever. You just have like pleasant music and bird sounds. And then if I want to take a 5 to 10 minute break from doing work, I'll just switch over to the game and like be like, all right, what do I need next? I need some wood. Okay, I'm just going to go methodically chop down a few trees, which it's also worth mentioning. This game does make like some of the basic acts of builder games uh, quite more realistic and therefore difficult. So like you cannot carry more than 20 logs, and it doesn't take up a normal inventory slot. It's like a special slot of like you like carrying stuff like this kind of. And
Yeah.
but
I
what
gotta
you want to
say,
do is you want a
watching this game
wheelbarrow.
is an exercise in watching someone carry wood around.
Oh
Seriously.
yes, especially at the early levels.
Fun.
But there's something
Not a
way
bad
more
thing.
satisfying versus something like a Minecraft about going, I want to build a tunnel here, so let me get a wheelbarrow, which is how you end up moving large amounts of those heavier resources like wood or dirt or whatever that don't take up normal inventory slots. And now you just have a wheelbarrow that's full of this shit, and then you take that wheelbarrow which actually like handles very awkwardly, you push it back to like where you want to put it, and then you just take the shovel and you're like putting everything back. It's weirdly satisfying.
This is like
Anyways,
general contracting ASMR.
Hmm.
yes, that's the subtitle for this game from now on.
Awesome.
Yeah, somebody somewhere does a construction job, then comes home and does this.
Time to kick back.
No, Stacy. The person who actually does this, they play Doom. Meanwhile, I spend all of my time programming, and then I want to pretend that I'm, a real human. So I chop down trees.
Look, I can do stuff with real things. Watch me
Yeah.
in this video game. Yeah.
It is strangely satisfying. I do actually recommend it for people who like, I guess for people for whom the part of the builder that's satisfying is like having that methodical task that does roll up into bigger things that you either can eventually partake in terms of the government system and all this other stuff, or just watch it and be amused by people trying to advocate for the rights of a meteor. Anywho's, that's it for me. Other games about people being people and maybe
Advocating
trying to
for or against other
cooperate but
people, or
failing
failing
to
miserably.
cooperate miserably. Tell us about The Last of Us.
Oh boy.
Uh,
Oh boy.
and to be more specific, The Last of Us Part 2.
Yes.
Oh boy. I have to preface this by saying
Major
I've literally
spoilers.
major spoilers. Also, I have not seen any discussion about this game that has not been an hour long plus. So like I'm trying to condense all my points in my main point. But basically, long story short, I am a plebe, depending on how you see it, who loves this game. It's totally up this game's asshole. I do have some problems with it, but they're not problems that I think take away from the overall experience. And my hot take is anyone who gets mad that the revenge plot doesn't end in revenge is seriously missing the point of this game. And I feel like, yeah, you're just missing the point. Now, that being said,
So therefore, everything must be doom, gloom, and terrible. Or
doom, gloom, and terrible. No fun at all. That being said, I do want to talk about a major thing about this game because I feel like everything has been said about this already, and that's narrative dissonance. I like everything that happens. I like the inciting incidents. I like Abby, even though she's a fascist piece of shit. Ellie is I'm not that big of a fan of her after the events of the game, but also narratively, this is a character flaw she's always had. You know, she doesn't let shit go. Never has she ever let shit go. So this is all justified. Now, the problem with the game that I've had comes during the two boss fights you have with Abby versus Ellie. Because I felt like this was the real point in the game where throughout the entire course of both Last of Us Part 1 to the end and Part 2, there's a lot of things characters do that you morally disagree with. There's no way that you can justify killing all these people in all these ways and all these types of people. But there's a lot of moments in the game where the game is very much trying to get you, it's trying to push your emotional buttons and distress you. But it keeps on making you do those things. And it says that if you don't pull the trigger or if you don't press this button prompt, you die and the game can't progress. And I like the artistic point that the game's trying to make about walking a mile in someone's shoes, the idea of self versus other. There's a lot of great, fascinating discussions to be had here. And I think this is even further punctuated by the fact that it's a game. But there's a lot of moments in the game where I go, I don't want to do this. Like, and those boss fights are a prime example because
it's not an option for you.
It's not
the thing, right?
And I find this very interesting because the game wants to play. This game very much wants to put you in the perspective of the characters. It does. There's a reason why you watch Joel get taken out the way he gets taken out because you're supposed to feel like Ellie in that moment. And there's a reason why you literally watch Lev and Yara's story play out as Abby because you want to empathize with them and you want to help them. But there's a lot. But when these characters actually interact and you're forced to play as them, it's kind of like, well, I think both of these are pieces of shit, and I don't want either of them to win. Or sometimes some people go, I want only one of them to win. And the game doesn't give you that, but it also wants to empower you to feel like these characters. So it gets very confusing what it wants you to do. And when I finished playing this game, especially that last, go on.
I want to insert too. These characters are not always all that empowered to begin with.
Yes.
They can get captured. They've had rough lives. They have limited perspectives sometimes.
Hey, half the time they even survive is through sheer luck.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up.
And like everyone has a limited perspective here. If anyone doesn't, it's the player.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, like here's Abby at a kind of a low moment here.
uh,
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Dante. You mentioned before it is like the best cinematic moment in the game. To me, it's the turning point where the game got interesting. Like, not to take too much of a point of it, but up until this point, I actually thought that this game was relatively simple and boring, actually.
mm,
Gameplay wise, it was something. There was some evolution, but not a ton. But the foundation of like the story and attempting to make me give a shit about it was just missing. But when this happens is when I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna get Abby's perspective. That's cool. But then when all of this starts to happen, I go, okay, this is actually new. This is
yeah,
actually her being exposed to a new world in the form of the Scar characters Yara and Lev,
Lev. Yeah.
and like now we're actually in interesting territory insofar as what you were saying, like the other us dynamic.
And it really comes to a head here. And also, one note I want to make is I actually like how Naughty Dog probably jumped the gun. It was like, yeah, people aren't gonna like this, and they made Abby way more fun to play. Which I really appreciate. Man, I fucking love those arms, babe. Man, like I'm gonna start lifting. I'm empowered. But
Yeah, she crushes people. Like
Yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
mad that like you can punch someone and just kill them in one hit, and that's how strong she is. Like, okay. But
Get
but
knocked
the
the fuck
thing
out.
that really took me home, that really narrowed had me to this point was the boss fight with Ellie really had me like, ugh. But the final encounter of Abby, and the game also kind of wants you to feel like this. You're just like, bro, what are we doing? What are we doing here? But
Mhm.
it makes you do this, and I'm like, why? Why is any of this happening? And I think a lot about Bioshock, and this relates to Bioshock
Mhm.
because I feel like Bioshock is a game that uses narrative dissonance to its advantage. And this is a spoiler for a 12-year-old game, but the whole a man chooses a slave obeys thing is a thing that really kind of made you think and re-examine the place of a protagonist in video games and whether or not what you're doing is right or just.
Yeah, it's the first time
And
I
I
remember a game slapping me in the face
yeah,
for playing it.
like you made me do this. It's like actually you just blindly obeyed commands. But Last of Us makes me think about that moment a lot because Last of Us this game is purely made to mess with the player's perception of themselves and of what they see as truth and everything like that. Uh, and
It doesn't really have the moment though where it actually like tries to turn a mirror on the player per se. Like I
mm,
agree. Like so I agree that ludonarrative dissonance is there. I agree that that's intentional and that they want you to feel like confused about whether you should do the things, but the game never has any kind of either in its design in terms of actually allowing you to have meaningful choices, nor does it have even like any characters that are just like, look at all these things you've done or whatever, which to be fair is cliched at this point actually, like, which to me leaves me with a certain sense of like the narrative dissonance feels more like someone just going, this sucks, doesn't it? And I'm just like, yeah, I was there at minute one. I agree, this sucks.
Yeah.
I actually totally agree. I fully agree. I also think that I think one part of the reason why I actually enjoyed it. Oh man, I love that moment. Part of the reason why I really enjoyed it is I'm a big movie person and I like cinema and stuff like that. And watching it was great, but also then you hit that moment. It's like I feel like I'm watching a movie because that's the only way I could justify these characters doing these things that I don't agree with. And then it goes, all right, now pull the trigger. uh, and um, and yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think the game is great. I think it's fantastic. I also, to your point, Zavi, I'm kind of glad there is no moment where it holds a mirror up to the player. And I think that's probably the boldest part of this game because it's up for you to decide, was Ellie justified? Was Ellie justified? Was Abby justified? Is anyone really the hero here? And I feel like the entire thing wants you to feel like this entire thing was a wasting time of brutality. And that's the point, though, because this game it's too brutal to the point that there are moments where I, as a player, I'm a very empathetic person, and the more I play realistic video games, I kind of find it hard to like kill people. But there's moments in this game where characters beg for you not to kill them. and there's literally no way for you to not do that or show them mercy. But the game decides to have a character beg for his life when there's no cinematic moments happening, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very strange that they have characters surrender, but you can't
mhm.
actually let them go because they will come back.
I
They'll
did
come
not
back for
know
you.
that.
Yeah, if you don't shoot them, they will just try to they'll try to come at you again, which is actually something that I think that was a seam for me. That was a seam tearing in my mind where um I don't buy that actually. Like
Yeah.
if I just murdered 5 of your friends and had you at gunpoint and didn't pull the trigger, like maybe 50% of people would, actually be like, no, I'm gonna come get you, and then I'd have to like fucking shoot them. But like some percentage of people are gonna be like, I'm leaving now.
Nah, this bitch
Mm,
gonna kill me. I'm out of here.
Exactly.
Yeah, like somebody's gonna say that surely, but no one does that in this game.
And that's
no.
where it starts to feel like a seam for me. It starts to feel like the game is just in punish mode 24/7, and like I'm not gonna sit here and say that it should have been different per se, but to me I just don't buy that part of it. The
Well,
big moments could stay there in terms of like Nora, I think was her name, and
Yara.
like no, not Yara,
Oh,
the hospital chick that you corner with
oh,
Ellie.
yes, yes,
I
yes,
think it
yes,
was
Nora.
Nora.
It is
Yeah,
Nora.
and like that can remain as is, where like it doesn't really give you a choice. But some of these other moments really make it seem like it's not just these main characters that we're following; it's everyone in the whole world, and I
Hmm.
don't buy that
and the thing is, to me, is it just feels like they needed more work on their AI to make this function better.
potentially. Yeah,
And both the friendly AI and the unfriendly AI. Like maybe with some more time, they could have created an animation where characters bug off and they don't come back. Maybe that was the intention, was to have that be a possibility, and they just didn't have time, didn't put the effort and the resources in. They don't give you the ability to knock out a character and leave, right? A lot of
Yeah.
character gives you the ability to render someone unconscious, and that can be like a chloroform to the mouth. It can be hit someone on the side of the head in a non-lethal manner. It can be just injuring someone for a while. But this game gives you none of those options.
Yeah.
It's kill or be killed every time, and it just doesn't feel right by the end of the game to me.
The
yeah.
final point I would like to make, though, is I kind of also think that I don't know. I think a lot about this game. It like that's why I know it's great because I'm thinking about it. I actively think about it. I find this very interesting with our world for the sheer fact that like it kind of makes you question what kind of people deserve your empathy, you know, especially in a time where we are very politically divided, and like this game is very big on factions and like groups of people and ideologies and stuff like that. So it really makes me like pause and just think like, you know, how these moments would play out in real life and if they are true to life. And I constantly ping pong between being like, wow, man, Abby's response to everything that's happening is totally realistic, and then I go, wait a minute, people aren't this brutal. And, you know, it makes you really think about what people are really capable of when you give them a chance, as Abby destroys that person.
I agree. I agree with that. I think that the factionness of this game is the best part of it, and I also think it's not front and center enough.
I
Actually,
agree.
like I wish we got
Totally
back to
agree.
Jackson. I wish we had like this other kind of stuff. Like the watching what happens to the Scars community like should have had more impact, I think. And these are all critiques coming from like I still like the game. I think that
Yeah.
it's actually something it does something that's important for interactive media to actually like fuck with, which is the idea of telling a story that makes you complicit and then actually shows you like why that was fucking terrible. And I think maybe the Ellie part was a bit too dragged out. I was on board with Ellie's being a dumbass pretty early on, but I've, from listening to other people talk about it, a surprising amount of like adult humans were like, no, I was on board with Ellie. I was ready to
That
fucking
was power
avenge
fantasy. I
Joel,
was
and
into
like
it.
I was ready, and I was just like, the fuck is wrong
Oh,
with
the
you?
fuck?
So
Dude,
so like clearly that
But
message deserves to be
that's
out
what's
there.
right, but
well,
that's what video games have trained people to do and to believe. Like
And
this
not
is going
everyone
to
has
be
played Spec Ops: The Line and BioShock.
right, right,
I
exactly.
will end by saying this note that Dina is the best character in the whole fucking game. she's the only
Okay.
good person. Dina is the only good person.
I don't like
because
she got like sidelined in my mind, but sorry, go
she
ahead.
does. She does. Dina's the only good person, and like that to hit that point home though. What happens when Ellie goes back home? She can't she's not there anymore, which actually took me. That was actually a big emotional moment for me when you go and see that empty house. I was like, oh, fuck. Like, because I thought something either bad happened to them or Dina and her get into an argument. But when she was just gone, I was just like, well, shit. And then the biggest thing, which I feel like is the whole full circle of the Joel story, is that she can't play the guitar anymore. And I feel, and that was a part of the game that I was kind of like, as someone who's not musically inclined, I'm like, why are you making me constantly play the song over and over again? And then when she can't do it, I go, wow, this just hits home that like this entire thing was just a waste of time. This whole thing was a waste of time. I hope you learned something. Like that's the way I feel like it. The game goes, I hope you learned something.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, now Last of Us 2, fantastic game. I think there's a lot of intricate discussions to be had about identity, politics, gaming, narratives in general, and like who we see ourselves as. And I can't say anything more that more intelligent people haven't already said.
Yeah, this game just did a good job of just like nailing all that stuff and acting like it was no big deal. It was like, look, a diverse cast. Who gives a shit?
Oh my god!
Yeah, that was the best part of the game actually. Is for me at least, it was groundbreaking in that way, and I'll give it credit for that if not for everything else.
Yo, guys, we killed Black people, Asian people,
we killed everyone.
Like
all the women,
everyone gets shot in the face.
Yeah,
even even dogs.
No punches held back. Yeah, for sure.
Fuck that dog.
Next game, I expect the cat. It's gonna die.
A bridge too far.
Okay. So I will actually take it from there to talk about Ghosts of Tsushima a little bit. I like changing my virtual background sometimes, and I'm gonna show some of the early parts of the game. I'm gonna spoil the first 15 minutes of the game because whatever at that point, right? But yeah, so when the game begins, you are Jin Sakai, who is the last remaining member of his samurai clan. And here's where the historical inaccuracies begin. This is actually a little bit before the classic samurai era, but we're gonna mince with history a little bit. And all of the Mongol Empire and all of the samurai eras all happening at the same time and whatever. So, but Jin is here with his uncle, and Khotan Khan, who is a cousin of Kublai Khan and a grandson of Genghis Khan. So we have an idea of what his lineage is. He is here to take over the island of Tsushima, where Jin's clan is from, and this is the area that his uncle is in charge of. He's the Jito of this island. And Khotan's job is to take over, but also to resupply his ships so that they can continue on to the Japanese mainland and take over the whole empire. That's the plan. So 80 samurai gather on a hilltop. They go against the Mongol warriors, and they are entirely destroyed except for Jin and his uncle, who's kept as a captive, in hopes that he will turn on the rest of his people, basically. So there's some nice bit here where Khotan introduces himself. He explains that he's learned the language of the people, that he has detailed maps. He knows which places to burn, which places to keep, and he knows the weaknesses of the samurai. And, he's trying to give him a chance to say, look, you can join me. It will be better for you. We can spare the majority of your people. And of course, samurai with their code of honor are not going to agree to change sides so easily as that. So this sets Jin on a path of wanting to rescue his uncle and eventually take back the island. And it has a similar sense of the people have been wronged. We must take things back. And obviously there's going to be some violence involved necessarily in doing that. But where this differs from a game like The Last of Us, and it's sort of post-apocalyptic free-for-all, in this world, the samurai code says that you should always look someone in the eyes when you kill them. There are ways in which you don't do it because they're based on terror instead of based on honorable fairness in their perspective. And the Mongols don't hold to any of that. They've been traveling around the world, conquering one place after another. And one thing they've learned is that any culture that is too rigid, those points of rigidity can be taken advantage of, can be used against them. And that's exactly what Khodan Khan plans to do. So to defeat him, then therefore you are going to have to not do that. You're going to have to not follow the code quite as strictly.
And the game makes you feel bad.
The game makes you feel pretty bad for it.
I think it's like the third assassination after like a certain point in the story. You could like have a flashback to your uncle being like, "You always look in the eyes," and it's just like, "All right, Mr. Miyagi, fuck."
and it's explained to you like, look, the Mongols are going to kill innocent prisoners if they're aware that you are in the area. So you can assassinate them, or innocent people who are not fighters can die. Here are your options.
And
Right?
I still love the very basic like foundation that Jin has that's separate from his uncle, where he just says like honor is about defending the people who can't defend themselves. Because when you frame it that way, this is all kind of fine.
Right. It's exactly. It's his own personal code of honor coming in conflict with the samurai code, which is very class-based. And it's very much about upholding the upper class over the lower class. They do not pull their punches. I've heard some commentary that more or less indicates, well, the samurai are just being treated like they're the good guys, and I disagree with that. I feel that's very not true. So this is a good diverse cast of characters as well in its own way. Without getting too spoilery about it, you're asked to recruit a few people. One of them is the thief, Yuma, who rescues you from being injured at the initial battle. Her brother is an unconventional blacksmith who's not a traditional fighter. But if you can recruit them, they can give you some cool tools to help you get over the walls of a castle where the drawbridge has been destroyed, right? You also have an archer, Sensei Ishikawa, who his potential problem is he was mentoring a brilliant young woman who has now turned and is helping the Mongols learn how to become master archers. And he's also trying to help another local clan that's always supported his family, except most of them have been killed, and the only remaining member of that clan, who's the matriarch of the family, is hell-bent on revenge against anyone and everyone involved in the plot to kill her family, to the extent that she may not help you on your journey unless you help her put everyone in the ground that had anything to do with it.
And I like that her particular tragedy is not the Mongols came in and did anything. It was actually like rivals who were like, the Mongols are fucking shit up. This is a great time to do
now
bad
is when
things.
we can take advantage of this situation and do what we wanted to do anyway, right? Yeah, and all of these characters have some interesting conflict. They are not all the same class. They're not all traditional male fighters. And I like that a lot. There are a lot of strong characters in the game, to the point where, again, it's not very historically accurate. At one point or another, it's implied that all the women in this game can read and write, which would not have been true in that era, especially of the lower classes.
We wish.
Just not how that worked back then, but that's okay.
It's just dangerous. Letting them read is just dangerous.
Right?
Women reading?
What? But why?
Start coming up with ideas and shit.
Yeah. In fact, Ishikawa's mentee has learned how to speak with the Mongols in their native tongue. So that's one of the advantages that she has gained along the way. So then you're stuck trying to translate when you don't understand very well.
Yeah,
So,
this game does a good job of like taking the right, arguably right, like affordances with storytelling to just be like, yeah, okay, if this was historically accurate, it would be infuriating in XYZ ways, so let's not.
right. Now, and gameplay wise, it's very different. You spend more of this game playing by yourself. You do still occasionally have companions that fight with you, though each fight differently from each other and in a way that makes more sense to me.
And they're actually useful.
They are quite useful. And in the same way, the Mongols' artificial intelligence is pretty decent. It makes sense when they notice you how they behave as a result. They use their horns to notify one another, and when people are on alert, they act differently than they would when they're not. There's a difference between whether they know you're in the area and where they know exactly where they saw you last. And there are some missions where if they can identify exactly who you are, you're going to fail the mission. And they're just very clear about when that will happen and what the consequences are. So all that I think worked pretty well for me. One thing that's very different about this game is it's got a lot of side quests and things that you may or may not need to do, and they add a lot of color to this sort of imaginary world that you live in. This is not real feudal Japan. This is imaginary feudal Japan, the same way we have imaginary feudal Europe in a lot of stories. So in the background that I'm using here, Jen is composing a haiku, actually, about remembrance, if I recall.
And it's a mechanic.
It's a mechanic in the game where you have to choose among different haiku lines to describe what this sentiment means to you. And at the end, you get a headband. And when you equip the headband, that same haiku is there. So it remembers what your choices were, and it makes a little something of it. And it talks about how being able to have a calm spirit prepares you for battle. You don't want to let your emotions get the best of you. Basically, you don't want to tilt in the terms of a video game. So you compose haiku, you attend hot springs where you rest and you relax and you think about your life in a reflective manner. And
then you go slay Mongols.
And then you go slay Mongols for a while, and then you can go back out and go hunting in the forest or picking flowers or whatever the wacky game has you doing next. It's got a certain repetitiveness to it that reminds me more of like a Dragon Age Inquisition than more of these traditional type of games. But I do like the fact that Jin Sakai is a very composed guy, but also someone who thinks outside the box and has a sort of non-traditional masculinity by a Western sense that is also very coherent and makes complete sense for him as a personality. So in some way,
he talks about his feelings.
He talks about his feelings and his past, and he's had a rough life in his own way, even though he was privileged in other ways. And in that way, it allows him to better empathize with people he meets who are not as privileged as he was in some ways growing up. So, and in a way that some of his other companions are not able to empathize with others, and that's notable and interesting as well. Lady Masako doesn't really understand why someone would need to steal. It seems just irresponsible and bad to her, but then she's never had to go hungry a day in her life, you're pretty sure, right? So while a lot of these sub-characters are flawed, they all make sense. And I find that's one of the main differences for me between Ghost, which I'm enjoying more than Last of Us, which definitely had its good point and it had a certain epicness to the plot as well. But I ultimately did not like Ellie as a person. And Abby was sort of in between somewhere. Whereas Jin Sakai I find to be fairly admirable as a character, even despite the mistakes he makes. And some of the other characters he's with are shown working through their issues in a way that helps you to understand them better. So even though they are flawed, I don't just find myself thinking, wow, these are terrible people, everyone is terrible. The Mongols are terrible, the Japanese are terrible, everyone's terrible. And that's kind of how I felt at the end of The Last of Us. It's like you've just been wrung through one too many times, gone through the ringer. And with Ghosts, I find I actually wanted to start it over again at the end of the game because now I have a different perspective on the characters than I did the first time.
Yeah, it's very hard to pull off a game where there's essentially no light at the end of the tunnel, which is what Last of Us 2 is doing.
Yeah.
This one has like a better foundation almost, where it's just like, oh, your whole way of life has been invaded. So like, okay, I understand.
Stacey, I have a question because I'm very interested in buying this game, but also I told you that earlier that it seems like there is a lack of post-game content, which for me does not warrant a full $60 purchase. My main question is, the only other fear I have is that I know about that duality combat system where if you engage in the combat in one way, you're more samurai, and if you do it in another way, you're more ninja, basically. But I heard stealth is garbage. Is that true?
So there are parts of the game that are clearly designed to be stealth based, and you will have to stealth through them. That is how the game
Okay.
works. There are other parts of the game which are fairly combat based. You can try to stealth it, but chances are you're going to end up in a brawl anyway, at one point or another. So they're very distinct systems, and they're both good in their own ways, but the combat is by far the stronger mechanic, and I think that actually has to do with the game engine. So it's an Unreal Engine 5. It's the next generation of the Unreal Engine, and it has very good rules on sightlines, but not very good in terms of hearing. You're able to get away with things that really it seems like you shouldn't be able to get away with. Like I can jump from a rooftop to the ground and hit the ground really hard and go oof, and somebody 2 feet away from me doesn't seem to hear me do that.
Whatever. That's just Bob doing his thing.
I don't know, maybe it was a cow.
Stop tripping, Bob.
I think trash is a bit too harsh on the stealth in this game. Like I, as a huge like Metal Gear fan and Market of Ninja and all that stuff, like to do stealth right, it often just needs to be the entire focus of your game. So what this falls into like a long tradition of games that have stealth as a arguably second class citizen, another way that you can go through encounters and whatnot. But what I would say is if you're sufficiently comfortable, push to the hardest difficulty that you can, because when you reach that point, you have to stealth because the numbers are just ridiculous and you can't handle it if you just go in there guns blazing.
They'll
And
just
so
surround you, and this is
they'll
not
just
like a ninja
ruin your
movie where
life.
they go in a circle and one comes at you at a time.
Yeah, on the
They
higher
will all
difficulties,
swarm you.
like there's no break between attacks. If there's enough of them around you, you will like you need to run. So like you start to like it starts to become a requirement that you blend the two styles in a way that feels correct.
And I would add this like archery
A
as
bit
well.
more separate. Yeah, and archery.
You're gonna snipe a few from far away. You're gonna assassinate a few, and then you're gonna use combat and what they call ghost weapons, things like a smoke bomb that you can use to make it difficult for the enemies to
Yeah.
see you and give you
But
a few seconds to run away.
something I will say is that in the classic like games that treat stealth as second class in a certain sense, stealth is OP because it's too simple if you're used to more complicated stealth. And so like there are parts in this game where I've forced myself to like go in there guns blazing because for fear of getting bored. So like it's a real design issue that you can
Damn,
work around.
Zavi, you're too good at this game.
Look, man, you play
Just too
Metal
good
Gear
at stealth
5 and
mechanics,
like
basically.
you play Metal Gear
Yeah.
5 and everything else becomes trivial. Like it's
It's very real. It could be harder. I wish it was harder.
I do too.
It isn't. And I will say this though, compared to The Last of Us, where nobody can ever actually, give up. They can't surrender. They can't flee. And in this game, this I don't think is giving too much away. As you go further into the game, there become ways to terrify people, which is an actual game mechanic that will cause them to turn around and run.
Yeah, they
And
start to become fucking terrified. Like you
they will
become
literally
mythic.
run across a mountain to get away from you. They will just keep going until
Oh God,
you
that
see
means
them, and
that
then they will
Stacy.
disappear.
That means that
I
Stacy
followed a
has
guy.
chased someone.
I have chased someone really, really far just to see what happens. And until you can't see them on your screen, they won't despawn. Right.
Wow.
So
Right.
you just wow. Okay, that's like I'm just imagining
I was
that
just
music.
curious.
And while
Yeah.
Stacy just chases this one fucking
This one
dude.
guy. Yeah.
Bad day.
So it can actually become a sort of a fun mechanic in the game to make it seriously part of your job to just terrify as many people as possible.
You're Batman.
So you don't have to fight them. Basically, I'm surrounded by guys, but half of them are going to turn around and run, so I can take this. It's fine. And I kind of like that. I kind of like, again, you are telling Jin's story, not your own. You're not given options where you can stealth or combat past a certain point. You're not given a whole lot of, do you spare this main character of the game or not? Jin does what he does, and the other characters are going to do what they're going to do. And by the time you get to the end of the story, you see why they've made those choices. They're telling a very specific story that feels very mythology, fable based. And I like the story that they've chosen to tell. The different parts of it interlock in interesting ways to come up with something that's greater than the whole. So like it gives me some more understanding for why games like this, games like The Last of Us, have you on sort of a rail shooter in a sense that a certain story is going to be told, period, right? But at the same time, since Jin is given some freedom to decide whether he's going to be more combat based or more stealth based, is he going to terrify people? Is he going to use all these ghost weapons to effectively confuse people a lot? You do feel like you're able to create your own version of this character. He still has the same story, but it's your version of him.
So it's a limited version of choices matter, basically. Choices matter within this narrow spectrum.
Yeah.
And I really love games that have an element of choosing your own adventure.
Mm-hmm.
I should probably, before I begin talking about Kentucky Route Zero, clarify a little bit about my own gaming background, because I grew up playing Math Blasters. I was a PC gamer in the 90s, and it was all educational. And I think you might hurt an NPC's feelings once in a while. So that's sort of who I am as a person who plays games. And you run errands for animals, where you're nice to people, where you're really nice to people. But I also grew up to work in publishing, and I love stories. So I've chosen today to talk about two games that are very similar, but only in a few superficial ways, I think. They're 5-act games in which your choices do not matter. And that's Life is Strange and Kentucky Route Zero. I don't know which to talk about first, actually, because Kentucky Route Zero was only just finished in January. It's been released over the course of 7 years in episodes and interludes. Like some more
wow.
Yeah. You watch a Game of Thrones and complain about 2 years between seasons.
Right. Yeah.
So Life is Strange, I think, might be the better known title. It runs on Unreal Engine. And you play essentially as a character who can rewind time a little bit. And you can change what has happened around you a little bit.
You have a rather unconventional superpower.
Yes, I think you get nosebleeds whenever you rewind time, which
that's the canon way of expressing in fantasy stuff. It's like, oh, you're abusing your powers, nosebleed.
Right, yeah, you're gonna hemorrhage. And here we see our main character, Max, wandering around her boarding school. She's choosing how to interact with her fellow classmates. And you have the option throughout the game of befriending or alienating or, ignoring anyone. And it turns out that these characters will come to impact the plot of the game in ways you can't imagine. So I think we're about to see Victoria sitting on some steps. Victoria is sort of the, she's not the big bad, she's the small bad. She's
the local school mean girl everyone knows.
Yeah, she's Regina George, basically. Yeah. And you can, if you so choose, spend some time, as I did, carefully orchestrating this football game that's taking place in the quad so that Victoria ends up getting paint dumped on her, which is really satisfying, and I did invest the time in. But that does affect your relationship with Victoria, who's a jerk in tights. And throughout each of the episodes, because the episodes are self-contained, you cannot really strategize your big game. You can only react to what's happening to you, which I think is interesting. It's you're limited as a player in the same way that Max is limited in her perspective as, I think, a 17-year-old. I was never 17, I wouldn't know.
Wait, can I just say this woman is trash? I've never seen this. I've never played this game. And I was like, wow, that was a lot of animosity for no reason. Continue.
Why? Because she's the new girl and she's getting attention, and that attention belongs to Victoria. Thank you very much.
She's a brunette with a bob, ergo she's the protagonist.
True. It's so true.
I have seen Max on the image macro that goes around every so often of like the bisexual Bob in video games. Spoilers, but
spoilers. Sure.
So I did spend my 20 minutes orchestrating Victoria's clothing disaster, and it was super satisfying. And as a result, Victoria was not my ally later when I needed her. But every character in the game is like that. So the way that you play the game, the way that you determine who's alive at the end, not that you kill people, because again, I play games where you can be nice or nicer, but like the survival mechanics of it depend on these tiny interactions that you cannot strategize in a huge way. And see, it's very satisfying even just watching it. And that is an interesting kind of, I mean, it's very televisual, I think. You are so marching down a particular path. There is an end game to this. There is a big choice to be made at the end of the game, but you can take, I don't know how many versions of that route. As opposed to a game like Kentucky Route Zero, which is also a 5-act structure. And that's sort of where the similarities end, actually, because you play as, I think, every character at a certain point. I have not yet finished the 4th and 5th acts. I'm halfway through because pandemic has given me some free time to work through my game library. But it's more of a novel than a TV series, I guess would be the way I'd put it. You cannot choose when you jump characters. You cannot choose the choices that you're presented with, and to a certain extent the choices don't matter, because the things that you're deciding are the lyrics of a song, or what the sort of main character Conway says to his dog, whose name you can choose. Whose gender you can choose.
But sadly, your interactions with your dog don't change the world.
Yes.
Okay.
Tragically,
my world.
Yes, tragically the dog is not a major part of the action so far, but you can pet her, which is important to me.
There's a Twitter account that's literally just like about video games. Can I pet the dog?
There's a video game on Steam I found yesterday that's basically just dog petting. You love it.
Oh boy.
So here are some of the choices you can make. You can either ask politely if someone has seen what you're looking for, or you can make small talk. And as far as I know so far, in the 3 acts I've played and the interludes, one of which was released as a VR headset standalone, it doesn't really matter which you choose, but in a certain sense it does, because this game allows me at least to roleplay a little bit more than Life is Strange did. Life is Strange has the one protagonist, Max, and you play, or at least I played as I thought Max would, in my understanding of her character. But these characters are more fragmentary. They're a little bit more esoteric, and so you can decide for yourself who Conway is, or who Shannon is, or which way you will drive down the Zero, which is an underground sort of quantum mechanical highway underneath Kentucky. It's kind of hard to explain, actually.
What?
This seems like it should have been mentioned sooner.
All of a
but
sudden,
go
Dante's
on.
like, what?
I'm from Appalachia. We just take these things for granted. Yes, I guess I should probably have mentioned that the major plot of the game is that you're attempting to find a magical highway, and you play as a
Gotcha.
trucker. So normal stuff. But the way that you get to these things is basically the only thing you can control. You can't control where you're going. You can control how you get there. So, for example, there's an entire interlude section that's just you with a telephone set, and you can choose which extensions to dial. I spent 40 minutes on it. I'm not proud. Every single extension, then you will get directions to certain campsites, or you'll learn lore about a certain creature. And it all affects the game in terms of your sense of what's happening, but you don't need to have done it. You could probably just dial the extension you're given and be done with that interlude in 5 minutes, but I spent 40.
Yeah. It sounds like it kind of gives you the short path and the long path through.
Right.
Well, yeah, it
How
sounds like
much of this flavor text and information are you interested in getting versus just getting to the point and going to the next part of the plot?
Yeah,
I kind of
the agency
appreciate that.
It sounds like the agency is both role playing and exploration.
Right. You are role-playing, and you're exploring. What you can explore is still pretty confined, but what you do with that space is sort of up to you. And because he plays different characters, it's equally hard as it was in Life is Strange to see where things are going and to prepare for them. And I enjoy that in both games because maybe it's the math blasters in me, but I like optimizing my playing style. I like knowing that I'm building the bridges in Animal Crossing the fastest, or I'm solving mathematical problems very quickly and efficiently. I have no idea what's happening in Kentucky Route Zero, and I love that. I don't know if this exit was the right one, and that forces me to play differently. So perhaps Math Blasters is no longer my gold standard.
Would you say that the story is building, or is it more episodic, like self-contained in Kentucky Route?
It's I would say it's more episodic because you are never getting a full story at a time. You will have a scene on a boat, for example, where you have 3 of your characters, and you will direct your character to go talk to character 2, and then at the end of that conversation, you're controlling character 2. So you never get a sense, even within a scene, of what someone's complete motivation is, which makes me feel almost like the player is less informed than the characters, which is unusual for the games that I play. I.e. Animal Crossing, where I am the character.
Sure. I mean, what are the themes other than weird sci-fi highways?
Well, it's magical realist, and it's a very specific kind of magical realism that is close to my heart as a native of West Virginia. It's about desolation and leaving and returning. You can visit a place called the Museum of Dwellings, and it's these abandoned houses that people pass through and sometimes sleep in, but they're displays. There's this route that's only accessible if you have sort of the old knowledge of the area. There's a lot of mining. You can't have a game about Kentucky or West Virginia without mining. And I'm not sure yet how crucially that will play into the final acts, but it does hang over everything. So it's sort of like a love letter to a place more than a novel, but it is also, short stories about these people that you are meeting very briefly.
I kind of like this idea of a science fiction world in like the Kentucky oil lands, because we've seen a lot of shiny, pretty science fiction, and we've seen some gritty urban science fiction, but I can't recall seeing gritty rural style science fiction before.
Also, especially as someone who is only grown up in cities, this entire setting is very fascinating to me.
Yeah, like
this is very unfamiliar.
As far as I'm concerned, this could be real. Like,
yeah,
you could just.
You wouldn't know the difference from
You could just give me this with a straight, like, you just place a game in Kentucky, and I already think that it's like slightly fantastic.
Is this what Kentucky's
there
really
must
like?
Be something magical going on down there. People live there, and I don't know why. So
harsh.
It's cruel. It's cruel. I say that as someone who's lived in small towns, though. So.
And I can't speak for Kentucky. I don't want the Kentucky Board of Tourism after me because I'm from a neighboring state. But there is a certain kind of magic that you can invoke in rural places because you don't see them as much in games. You see, I'm not going to talk about Fallout 76. That doesn't count.
That's not a game.
That's not a game. That's
a slot machine.
Fallout is sort of suburbia based, anyway.
It's an alpha demo that wasn't updated.
That's generous, honestly. It's rural in a way that is not exactly apocalyptic, and it's not exactly a wasteland. It's a place people live who you don't understand or know, and I think it's very cool to see that, as opposed to the usual spaceships and tunnels through cities that I've never been to, because this does remind me of where I grew up, and I don't think I've played a game like that before.
Nice.
Did he just find their game piece? Clearly that's the solution to the problem, is to give the gamers their game piece. And they'll talk to you.
A 20-sided die?
Like I said, I love this game.
Yeah, I may be stopping to get this one after this.
It looks a lot like Oxenfree.
It is.
It does remind me of that.
Oxenfree. It doesn't run in real time as much. Oxenfree is over a single night, and I have no idea how long this one takes. But it's similar.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying about, like, It's more about a place than it is like these particular characters. Like the characters almost feel like, from what you're describing and what we're seeing, it almost feels like they're all guests.
Yes.
It's really about the place.
Yes. You're seeing facets of the region through the people passing through. Which, as a person who works in, the book industry, appeals to me very much.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who loves the region that this is about, feels really rewarding to see.
Nice.
Like a book where each chapter is told from the perspective.
My favorite kind of book. And that's the dog right there. I don't know if you can see.
Doggo. It looks very gangly and weird.
I like
say
the
it was
way
a pretty
the
dog.
people seem so small and the world around them seems so big.
Yeah, the art style is definitely.
Of
I
that,
don't know. It's.
If it was a comic book, I would for sure read it.
It's
Or like it looks like the backgrounds of a like animated series, like something that you'll see in the background of one of those.
Sure, like a Samurai Jack or something.
Yeah. A
Yeah, he's-
Tarkovsky series.
Yeah.
choices you can make, actually. The text on the screen is a poem for the computer password, and you can choose what the poem is. As far as I know, any poem will unlock the computer. That would be well.
So I'm just gonna stand there and write my own
Computer
poem for
says-
20 minutes.
Roses are
Does
red,
not
violets are
that's
blue.
correct.
Unlock the computer before I destroy you.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just this great, weird little moment.
Nice. All right. Well, that is a ridiculous breadth of experiences. That was we were all over the joint on that one, I gotta say. In a good way. We've had some of the most brutal shit we've ever seen and some of the most passive, peaceful stuff we've ever seen. But I think if no one else has closing thoughts, that might be where we leave it for the day.
Nintendo needs to release more information. That's all I need to say. That's all I gotta say. That's all I have to say. They need to release more information, man. Like they shadow dropping games a month before they come out because that's the only time. That's the latest amount of time they legally can. Just give us some more information. Just tell me what's in development.
Kentucky Route Zero for like 7 years or something. It's coming out in 8 months and 2 days, so whatever.
Damn, man.
Clearly could have done better. No, that's a good point. So we will wrap it up there. That's a good final thought. But you guys can always find us in the internets. We're on, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And of course, we'll post the next episode once we got it. And Dante, I think you have your own jam.
Oh yes. If you are in the New York, New Jersey area and you need a photographer, videographer, you can follow me at Grandmaster Flash Studios. That's Grandmaster, no E, Grandmaster_Flash on Instagram. And you can follow me and all my comedy and like all the cool creative stuff that I do. And you guys are all fantastic people.
What podcast are you doing these days? You're always doing some podcasts.
I do have a podcast called Bogart and Hanson, which is a sketch comedy podcast. As of now, it is currently being rebranded and revamped, and we are actually filming all of the audio sketches that we have recorded. So it's taking a little bit of a time. So if you want to follow my comedy at Bogart and Hanson and see what we've already done, follow at Bogart and Hanson on Instagram. And again, if you want to follow me, that's Grandmaster_Flash on Instagram.
All right. The man takes good pictures. I can vouch.
A Spider-Man, specifically a Spider-Man.
Probably our Spider-Man.
I believe it. All righty. Well, then we'll leave it there. Until next time, have fun playing video games, y'all.